Welcome to Decoding the Conflict Mindset, a podcast designed to help change the way you think about conflict. I'm Dr. Debra Dupree, founder and host of the DCM Podcast. We welcome you here today, and I'm delighted to bring to you another fabulous thought leader, mediator, and experienced professional in his walk of life, Ty Burdoni. After graduating from Barry University School of Law in 2010, Ty was hired as a staff mediator at the 9th Judicial Circuit's Dispute Resolution Department in Osceola County, Florida. He stayed in that capacity for another 7 years, mediating anything from family, small claims, civil, business litigation, residential mortgage, and homeowner association cases. Well, he finally decided to move on and started his own mediation center, the Mediation Center of Central Florida. Ty and I crossed paths just recently after he heard me speak on another program. And since that time, we have continued to connect, collaborate, and expand how we think about conflict. And so I'm really excited to have you join us. Ty has some unique insights and experiences, not just from a mediation perspective, but also how people are impacted by conflict. And this is in all walks of life, not just home, family, but also in business and in the workplace. So what can we learn? Well, come on, stay with us. We'll be starting very shortly. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so you're notified of every next episode we have forthcoming. Know somebody going through a divorce? Know somebody who may need or benefit from mediation services? Then this is the opportunity to pass on to that person and have them participate or listen to the recording later. Well, welcome to Decoding the Conflict Mindset. Again, I'm Dr. Debra Dupree, your host and founder of DCM Podcast. And today I'm so delighted to have as our guest speaker, Ty Burdoni. Welcome, Ty.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here. It's a real pleasure. I've been looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Yes, we have been talking about it for a while. And, and we sort of have an interesting connection of how we came together a few months ago. And I believe it was you received my invitation to listen in on a program I did for the nonprofit that Mediator Support Will Work for Food.
Yes.
And it was right after the Kauai fires. And so I had designated the Food for Kauai as part of that. So it was exciting. It really drew a lot of attention. And so you attended virtually. And
I did.
Then that has started a conversation between the two of us. And
yes, ma'am. It did.
And now we're here. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So Ty, I first want to ask, people love to hear people's stories, and so I think it's always intriguing and a learning, insightful moment when people can hear, how did you get into the world of mediation? Just briefly.
Yeah. By mistake. So I was in my second year of law school, and everyone, when you're in law school, like everybody's smart in law school.
Yes,
A's are not easy to come by. And someone said, "Oh, take mediation. It's like basket weaving. It's an easy A, and I'll take every easy A I can get." You know how I mean that. But I fell in love with it. It just bit me. And from that moment on, then I did an externship. And then from my second year all through my third year, I was like a staple at my courthouse in the ADR department, in the mediation department. And, I tell students, I teach county mediation and family mediation and circuit mediation. And I tell them, listen, the best way to learn mediation is in county, small claims, right? Because you get to do it again and again. You make a difference in your community. And so by doing that, then you also get to know the directors in that area. You get to know attorneys in that area. And so I was there for about a year and a half every week. They couldn't get rid of me. And luckily, as things tend to work out, the staff mediator was leaving and I was graduating and they offered it to me. I got really lucky, because that's a great way to learn how to mediate, is to do it every single day, 3 to 5 or 6 times, depending, right? Because small claims mediations can be fast sometimes,
Yeah.
as opposed to family mediations. But I was the staff family mediator in the Ninth Circuit, in the Ninth Judicial Circuit in Orange and Osceola County. I was in the Osceola County Courthouse, and I was there from 2010 until my wife doesn't let me forget her birthday on 2017, April 26th of 2017. And so it was just a great experience. I learned how to mediate, and I really grew into it. And it luckily mediation. I was born to do a few things. Mediation's one of them, and I
Yeah.
love it. And I feel like I wear a cape underneath my suit when it works. When you can help, what
Mhm.
what an impact and difference we can make in people's lives.
Mhm.
And so when I left, I went to private practice, and I'm also a primary mediation trainer as well because I love to talk about
Yeah.
mediation. And so that's roundabout. That's how I,
Okay.
kind of got
No, that
into mediation.
well, that's a great story, and I have to say, I did an interview project during the beginning of COVID and talked to a lot of people who had become mediators, many of them attorneys, and oftentimes it was by mistake. I fell into it. I fell in love with it, and I have
Yeah.
to admit, I sort of did the same thing. Is that a law passed? It's like, oh gosh, this is really affecting me, but I need more skills to deal with more people, you know. And
Mm,
so, yeah.
yeah.
But one thing, Ty, I want to go back to is that first of all. Maybe some of our listeners and viewers may not know where Osceola is, but it's in the state of Florida.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
I have
Central
lots of
Florida.
relatives there. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And but the thing is that I really loved about what you said is not only was is volunteering a great way to hone your skills, craft
Hmm.
your experience in
Yeah.
mediation, for example. It could be applied to almost anything.
Hmm.
Then it paves the way for a job.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah.
Because they get to know you. And
Right.
and so when they have to decide who they it helps that they know you, to be
Yeah.
quick.
Or they know,
And you
like,
make contacts.
right. So they know and like and trust you already. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It
yeah. Well,
helped. It didn't
wonderful.
hurt.
Yeah. No, I guess not. I guess not. Well, I know that there are a few things that I wanted to cover with you. After all, this is called decoding the conflict
Yes, ma'am.
mindset. And you know, not dealing just with family mediation. I myself do a lot of workplace interventions and so forth. But people are people, and what's going on at home affects them at work, and what's going on at work affects them at home and in
Yeah.
their communities. And so when people come into your mediation room, whatever the issue might be, what are three things that you feel it is important to focus on?
Right. I think innately, everyone in conflict, when they come into mediation, regardless,
Mhm.
there are three things roughly. That there could be many things, but it kind of boils down to their their
Mhm.
fears. What
Mhm.
are they worried about? And they are worried. What is it that they need to
Mhm.
resolve, and what are their goals for that day in mediation, and for, generally speaking, what some kind of resolution to this problem is going, how is it going to affect me, and they're so worried about the three of those
Right.
things.
Mhm.
And so we need to figure out what they are, regardless of the conflict. And then once you do that, then you can start to, well, where do the fears, needs, and goals of this party and that party, and it's not just the parties, their representatives as well, they have
Mhm.
things that they want to get done too. Where do they all kind of coalesce, and where do they intersect? Sometimes that's the place where we can try to find some resolution, but as you start to create the agenda, we're trying to figure those things out, and we're listening, and letting folks talk.
Mhm.
um Everyone likes to talk,
Mhm.
and they need to talk, and when you're a very, very good listener, you're starting to build rapport with them, and the more that you help them get into a safe place where they don't feel threatened, where they feel like they can express themselves, where they can they'll tell you everything once you start building rapport.
Mhm.
And then if they trust me, then they'll start to trust the process. And if they trust the process, Then when I bring back these positions that have been alien to them and they have been fighting for, because they come into mediation with blinders, right? They've been thinking on this for a long time and they've been upset at it. And so it takes a while in mediation to get them to the place where they can, I'm such a geek too, a big sci-fi, where they lower their shields, and they'll be open to the reframing of the position into a future-oriented, positive perspective. And we don't always get it on the first try, what have you, but if you are able to help them see a way through and they trust you, they'll listen, and then you can help lead them that way. When it works, doesn't work all the time, but it works a lot.
It does work a lot. Yes, yes. I think the figures that I've known for over 20, almost 30 years is that mediation is successful a good 80 to 90% of the time. Yeah. And when it doesn't resolve through mediation, sometimes the issues that they bring to the table are not necessarily mediatable, or sometimes they need to have somebody else weigh in and make the decision.
Yeah, the answer is yes. And I tell my students, the goal of mediate, just yesterday, I was talking to a group of law students, and I said, something came up and I looked at everybody and I said, what's the goal of mediation? And someone said, to come to agreement. And I said, sometimes, but agreement isn't the actual goal of mediation. The goal of mediation it can be very different things. It's case by case. It's what do the parties need that day, in that moment, right then and there, to help them move forward. Sometimes it's too early for mediation. Discovery hasn't taken place, or something hasn't happened yet, or it's to dispel misconception. It's to help get them on track. Sometimes they need the judge. Sometimes they need a partial agreement. What they need is what we're there to figure out. That's what the goal of mediation is. It isn't to come to agreement, right? It's to get them to be able to move forward. And even when there's an impasse, I'm still going to be very positive with the parties, and I'm saying, look, even though you didn't come to agreement, mediation served its purpose. Now you can move forward, because if it's court ordered, everything stops during the mediation process. When mediation's over and I file that mediator report, then it can move on. Maybe that's what you need. So it's case by case. It's never the same.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing that up, as far as it's not necessarily about agreement. That's one byproduct. And I know other people have said, well, it's about resolution, and yet I have another guest speaker, Sam Artery, who was on. It's not even necessarily resolution, but it can be repairing relationships. And so that reminds me of yet another guest speaker I've had, Harold Coleman, and he talks about, it's not just resolving the factual disputes, but it's also addressing the emotional differences. And that's where the repair comes into play, not only for the relationship, but for the person. Because what my experience has been, and maybe it's yours too, Ty, but in many times, particularly workplace, people have actually not come together long enough to ever really talk about the issues between them without escalating into higher conflict. And so with the presence of a mediator and like again, what you said as far as building trust, then we're actually creating psychological safety, so that the person can, like you said, let down their shield, let down their barriers, to then begin exploring and perhaps saying things truthfully and honestly that they may never have had the opportunity to say before.
Or hearing things that they weren't able to hear before, and then internalize them because they couldn't before this. And so we can help that happen. And wow, when that happens, it's amazing, and it feels so good. It's like a natural high. It's when folks come in and they're nervous and they're mad and they're angry, and then at the end they say, can I hug you? Thank you. Can I pray with you? Or they're just, you can see a weight has been lifted. It's a great feeling.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I want to get at, but one thing you said that I think is so important, that ties into the neuroscience behind people in conflict, which I love to talk about and help people understand. But you mentioned about lowering your voice, and shifting your demeanor. And so elaborate more on that and how that makes such a difference for you. The magic of mediation, Ty.
Yeah. The magic, right? And the magic happens little by little over time. I think we're stacking things on top of each other, starting with our presence, the way we come to mediation. When we see them, they are in so many different states. And we have to get them first because they're nervous. They've heard misconceptions. They don't know what mediation is about. We have to get them okay. And then we have to be transparent. And then we have to give them a presence that can calm them down, that they can feel comfortable with us. So this attorney one time called me the Mr. Rogers of mediation, and I just loved it.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's all about my empathy. It's all about my nice guy, my eternal optimism, and it rubs off on folks because they want to feel better. And so when you start listening, then a lot of other things start happening as well. And what they see is me listening empathetically, or some folks like to say active listening, but they see me all in. They see me being authentic. And I am, but I'm doing many things. Like I tell folks, mediators are juggling 16 balls all at one time, and you get better and better at it. But when I'm looking at you and you see me listening, that's what everybody wants, everybody needs. And I'm going to respond, tilt my head. I hear you. And I like to say I'm going to be subjectively neutral in each room, right? I need them to see me. I don't always agree with positions. I may not even like somebody. I may like somebody. Doesn't matter. Everybody's neutral. But in the room with them, they need to trust me. They need to. And so when we talk about a safe place, the way we create that safe place is by them feeling comfortable, by them feeling heard. And so again, we're stacking things. And what am I doing as I'm listening? I'm looking for what is it that they need? What is it they want to take away? What are they worried about? What is it that may work for them today? Now, sometimes you get folks like attorneys. They're great at saying these are what the issues are. Or you get folks who they don't want to be in mediation. They've never been in mediation before, and they don't know how to. And so we're having to read in between the lines, parse out their words, kind of lead them a little bit as is needed. But what helps me help them is, and what's interesting is, I've always been a nice guy and very empathic, and so that, and I'm a talker, and so that lends itself, to mediation, and a caring individual. I could go on and on and on. I mean, there's mediator qualities, I think, but and they're different. But when I've seen somebody in conflict, just my presence has been able to help, and I would eventually be able to get them through it, and then we could move on. But it would take me a while. And then I was introduced to Doug Knoll, right? Forget, I have the book right here somewhere, I know, but you can how to de-escalate someone in 90 seconds. And I will admit that at first I thought, oh, come on, 90 seconds, it takes me far longer, that's got to be some marketing or what have you. But I've heard him speak and he's so interesting. I stopped saying active listening and I started saying empathetic listening, because it resonated with me what he was saying. And then I heard you speak in your hour, you know, with after the fires and what have you. And you were really talking about very similar things. You're both talking about, you know, the neuroscience of emotions. And while I was always good at it, it wasn't until I heard you talk about it that it just something clicked. And then I realized, okay, that Doug Knoll is right. It is, because the day after I listened to you and I took copious notes because I was just enthralled with what you were saying. Because they don't well, no, thank you. they don't teach us in law school or in mediation training about the effect, how somebody's emotions can not only affect them, but in a heartbeat change the way they'll respond. And in listening to you, you kind of broke, like, I remember you gave like a flow chart. If they're crying, this is what might happen. And the very next day, this individual starts really crying. And in that moment, she's like, oh, it doesn't matter, you know what, give them what they want. And I heard your voice in my head. That's exactly what you were saying. And it just, that's what helped it click. And I understood in that moment. And I say, what did Dr. Dupree say? Okay. And then in that moment, I said to her, it was a very nice lady. I said, I consciously started breathing, and I said, you know what, let's take a moment. And so I changed the inflection of my voice, and I brought it down, and I shifted the focus away from the conflict, right? Because we'd been there for a while already. And we started a little late, right before lunch, and then we kept on going. So it was like 2:30. And I'd been going back and forth. We were in caucus, right? And so I said to her, let me ask you a question. Um, we've been here a while. Have you eaten? Have you taken a break? And she said, no, I haven't. I said, look, right now you got a little bit emotional. And you know what happens when you get emotional is we don't think clearly. What I want you to do, if you don't mind, is let's take a break. Let's take 5 minutes. I think I said 10. I said, let's take 10 minutes. Do me a favor. Go outside, breathe a little bit, make yourself a sandwich, eat, get some drink, and then come back. And I don't want you to think about this. And I want you to know that we'll get past it. It's going to be okay, as much as it can be. I don't remember exactly what I said, but we took a break. She got some food. She came back, and she was different. And she said, Ty, thank you. I needed that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, wow. That normally would take me 20 minutes or so. You were right on the money. And I remember I sent you an email right after that. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then the next week, I have every Saturday, I do something called the Mediators Roundtable, totally free for mediators. And I said, this is what we're talking about. You all have to see that. I want you to watch this. And then I started talking about it as best I could. And then I made it. Someone happened to give me a copy of Doug Knoll's book, and it was just happened at the same time. And so I happened to go to Italy for a vacation. That's the book I took with me. I read that book during, like, and every time I stopped for a cup of coffee, I sure pulled that book out. 8 hours going back and forth, and so I was able to finish it. I took amazing notes. And the point of the matter is, within the last 6 months, well, a little longer than that maybe, but the point is that only now have I really started to understand, or start. I haven't started really understood yet. I'm still learning, and I want to learn more, because the the what is going on in people's brains when they're going through conflict, if the professional, if the individual, if it's workplace, and it's not, I'm a mediator, so for me it's when I'm mediating. But I was talking with my daughter, and she was going through something, and I didn't have a dog in the fight other than I love you. It wasn't like when my skills never work when I fight with my wife, because I'm no longer neutral, right? I'm vested, I'm all in. I can't think straight. But I could just see when someone starts to get emotional, there's so many little nuance things that happen. And so I could see it. And so what did I do? I changed my voice. I stopped talking about it. I said, honey, listen, one, it's gonna be okay. And two, and then I told her a joke. And I tickled her and I made her laugh. Because I remember you talking about get them into a different emotional state. And oh my gosh. And so now every single time that I'm just communicating in generally, but especially in media, because I mediate every day, you'll see just so many aspects and facets of emotions creeping in. And as it starts to creep, and so if I listen to Doug Knoll, he says you have to listen empathetically. You know what it is they're going through because you go through it yourself. Just listen, and then you have to validate, and then you have to reframe. And it works. And you just have to practice. And you have to be perceptive. And so I'm naturally so empathetic, and I love what we do. And so when I'm not only have I made the connection, but now I need to keep on practicing and now keep on focusing. And so it makes me even more effective, right? FYI. And so the way we modulate our voice, right? How we know when to shift, and it's also, I also like to talk about mediator. How do we become good mediators? Experience, practice. You have to mediate. You have to, or observe. The more we do it, right, your mediator's instinct becomes informed, and so you can trust. You need to trust your instincts, and if you've been doing it long enough, then you become even more effective. And so it's just an ongoing educational process, and I'm still growing. And you were the most recent kind of impetus that kind of made something click. And so that's another reason I'm so happy to kind of be here, because you helped.
Thank you so much for the public accolade. I really do appreciate it. It helps me feel that my life learning and experience of and I'm getting back to my fellow mediators. There really is something there.
There is. You wear a cape. You really do.
Well, I was just to say, let me put my big hat on that has a big M on it. So mediator. And when I'm not mediating, let me take it off. Okay. So yeah. One thing, a couple of things you said, Ty, that I'd like to comment on is that, like when you were sharing the story about, the person who was getting emotional and then you paused and said, have you had anything to eat, or just breathe. There's a couple things about that. In the earlier days of mediation, I think we used to, reach a lot of agreements and resolution by starvation. And we would just beat people into it. We'd go 8-9 hours, 10 hours a day. Like, how productive is that?
Got to be careful.
Yeah. And so we've become much wiser. And actually, COVID helped because we know we can't be online as long as we can in person. And so I think back at some of the decisions that people reached in those extraordinary long hours. And now we know the benefit and the need, because some people have a medical need to eat more regularly or take a break and so forth. But what you help do by recognizing that is that, sometimes we need to disengage from the heat of the moment, the intensity of the conflict, so that we can actually calm down. Because when all that's, when we're hungry, it affects how we think. When we're tired or frustrated, it affects how we think. And so if we want good thinkers in the mediation room who can, digest what's going on, then we need to make sure that we're creating the context, the environment for them too, not just our redirecting and reframing skills, but also that our environment, the context is good too. So so I talk to people a lot that it's important to detach or disengage from the heat of the moment and then come back and re-engage in a calmer moment.
Yes, ma'am. That's when we can find agreement. It's in the calm. It's if we have to get them off, I call it the roller coaster of emotion. We have to get them off that and then get them onto the rational pavement, so to speak. And that's where interesting.
Well, you said this earlier, something about, we are redirecting their brain actually to get out of the emotional part and back to the thinking part. And I liked how you said getting back on the pavement. That's hard, that's solid, that's that's surface, and now we can move forward. Otherwise, we're all over out here and we're not focused.
Yeah, it's true. You have to get them through that first, and to that place where they're just not in monkey brain, in the back where they're able to, and then keep them there. Now that's the tough thing as well, keeping them there. Like if we're in caucus, if you leave them alone too long, they're going to start to stew. So I tell folks, you give them homework. Keep them working on something rational, and they're engaged so that they don't. And so it's just a constant a learning process. It's all about nuance. It's amazing, and you recognize, and every case is different, and everyone is different, but you fall into the person in front of you, and you really start to create a bond, with them, and you can sense what they're going through and what they may need. Now, not all the time, but often enough. Right. And then they trust you, and then and then they'll follow you, and they'll and to hopefully to agreement. And it's amazing. It really is amazing, what we can help others do. I'm not so great at doing it for me, but I'm pretty good sometimes at doing it for others.
Well, very good. Yes, there's a couple things, when we talk about, the title of this podcast is Decoding the Conflict Mindset. And so I'd like to summarize a couple of things I heard you say, because what I have found, both being a psychologist and a mediator, is that many people have a tremendous fear of conflict. And so that fear can immobilize them as well as debilitate their ability to work through conflict. And so, part of our job then is to help them change their thinking about conflict. And this isn't just for the parties in conflict. I think being mediators, we naturally know and embrace conflict for others. I mean, not like conflict in my own personal life, but but I'm better able to deal with it. But I also would say that for the legal advocates, they have some fear of dealing with conflict, not so much from the conflict itself, but I find that a lot of legal professionals have a fear of the emotions that come up.
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there.
Because they bring their own. Yeah, I might have you come back and do another podcast with me then.
But I think you're right. I would agree. And it's to varying degrees depending on who's in front of you, or who's in front of them. Nicest folks, but you get the wrong person in front of them, and then they, boy, we better. I have to caucus the attorneys sometimes, not the clients.
Well, I know sometimes some of my mediations have been more complicated because of the attorneys, not the clients. Sometimes. And what I'd also say is that, this kind of approach, and I want to summarize 3 things I heard you say, is that, not only for attorneys and mediators, but also leaders, managers of people. It really can be quite simple if we break it down, chunk it down. And the 3 things I heard you say is one, well, actually maybe 4, is one, paying attention to the nuances of a behavior that are reflective of emotion, decoding the emotion, what's going on here, and sometimes it's as simple as asking the person is that, I just saw a shift in your facial expression. What's going on? What's happening for you right now? And now you've created that space for them to talk about. So it's decoding the emotion. And then you've said several times, you change your voice, you modulate it. So showing up with empathy, how you show up as the mediator, the lawyer, the business leader is huge, right? Yeah. And then the last thing is then to, again, how do we get them back to a place now? Okay, let's go back and talk about the problem now. How do we redirect them to get back on the pavement where it's hard, that we're stable, we're on a solid surface here, and then, okay, how are we moving forward?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And don't be afraid to do it. On the contrary, we have to do it. That's our job. And you have to be able to see both perspectives, and to present it to each of them in a transparent trusting way, and then help them see. Our job is also to, not all the time, but as appropriate, to come up with suggestions, because I'm hearing both sides. I'm hearing what everyone is worried about, what everyone wants, what maybe I'll potentially this, and we have to bridge that gap.
Mhm.
And so then we have to help them see it, and it's just a process, and
Mhm.
it takes some time. I had someone recently say, called me up, hey, I need a mediator, what do you charge and how long? And I said, this is how much I charge, and this is how I do it. And like, well, we're only going to need about an hour. And I was like, oh.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
be careful how you answer that one, because
Yeah.
they're already in a place. No, you can't really. So then,
Yeah.
instead of saying no, you can't, I said, well,
Mhm.
tell me about what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so we have, because I have a plan. I'm going to try and get you here,
Mhm.
but I know let me start here. And
Mhm.
then, maybe I have to go. Sometimes you can't attack it straight on. Sometimes you have to go laterally,
Mhm.
but I'm following my instincts as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And then, well, how do I get you there? How do I present this idea? And sometimes you don't always. I have to try again, and you have to be flexible as
Yes.
well, right? We have to be able to recognize it's not what we think, it's
Mhm.
what works for them.
Right.
And so I'm also a big Bruce Lee fan. And so, but not because, he's great in Kung Fu, but he was also a philosopher.
Yeah.
And so right here, I have something, Bruce Lee, and it, empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water.
Mhm.
So that's mediation for me. Empty your mind is when you read the case, read it, understand what's going on, but don't take anything with you as this is what's going on. This is what must happen. Pleadings are subjective. People fib a little bit. Things have changed. You have to be open. Don't make
Mhm.
any decisions, and be formless and shapeless. Like water. So
Mhm.
for me, the so he also said, water can you pour water into a cup, it takes the form of the cup. You pour it into a teapot, it takes the form of the teapot. So the
Mhm.
water is the mediator, and the form is the
Mhm.
agreement potentially,
Mhm.
and we have to be willing to flow with their needs, and in that day, in that moment. And so we have to be open, we have to be flexible, and we have to be able to move
Mhm.
according to how they're feeling, where they're at. Is today the day? Is it, do can we come to agreement? Is it a partial agreement? Is it
Mhm.
do we need to come back?
Mhm.
Do we need a break? Is it time for lunch?
Mhm.
Do we need is it has everyone gone to the bathroom?
Mhm.
What do we
Yeah.
need in that
Mhm.
particular moment? And it can
Mhm.
make a big difference, just going, you were talking about it, when they go outside and they breathe a little fresh air and they stop thinking about the conflict and they come back. Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
And it's all those little things, though, that the mediator is always trying to recognize and kind of deal with and put in there. And it's just an amazing dance
Mhm.
that that when it works instinctively.
Yeah.
And I can look back and say, oh, this is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened, but I had no idea what was going to happen going into it. Even having talked to folks and read everything, people are really
Mhm.
funny. They have a funny way of
Mhm.
making things very unique,
Mhm.
challenging. So it's just an ongoing process, and I'm always learning, and
Yeah.
and it just makes us better at what we do. And so I'm loving this conversation, by the
Yeah, yeah.
way.
And I know we could go on forever. And
Forever, and we
yeah,
can't.
yeah. And so when I come to Florida, I'm definitely looking you up. I've got a couple possibilities coming up. So,
Look forward to
one
it.
thing, Ty, you've said is that you're always learning, and that's one thing that I really embrace about the human being is that we uh, there's always something more to learn, and I
Yeah,
get so excited about learning myself. And so I've got a saying, it's important that we learn, that we live it, and we keep growing it.
yeah.
You know.
Agreed.
Yep, yep.
Agreed.
And one of the things I'm going to keep in mind, your Mr. Rogers of mediation. You're going to see that back from me again.
I hope so.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed about our conversation today is again just that, breaking down, what's going on for people. And that's on a contextual level, on an emotional level, on a factual level, and being attentive to where people are in time. And one of the things that I sort of read into what you said, and I know I've experienced it, is that when you actually create that kind of climate, whether it's in mediation or whether it's a manager, a leader, hearing both people out about an issue, or whatever it might be, is that with, I just love it when one party in the conflict actually starts offering up suggestions for the other party about what they need or what they might benefit from, and they're offering things away, and that's like, wow, because then that really makes the person, feel acknowledged, valued by the person that they're in conflict with.
Yeah, absolutely. And a trick for mediators is always to give the credit to the parties.
Right.
Recognize a good day wherever it comes from, but it's not, you had nothing to do with it. It was them. And because they also need to, everyone wants to be, great job, well done, wow, that was a wonder, look, it made a big difference. It's so true. It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack here, and I've been so delighted to finally have you on
As have I been. Thank
the
you
podcast.
so much.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I know our paths will continue to cross, and I'm curious,
I hope so.
Ty, you mentioned something that to me before we got started. I'd love to have you share that with our audiences as far as what new development is potentially happening or unfolding for you because of just being in the right place at the right time. Or maybe you can't speak about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it.
Okay. Okay.
But one day I would love to. I teach mediation now, and I love doing it, and I'm happy. I'm quite happy. But I would love to do it in a law school setting as well.
Wow.
And so yesterday, I stood in for a professor for a mediation theory class, and I'm going to do it again tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And one day I would love to be, a mediation professor at law school. I don't know why. That's just something I would absolutely love to do. And it was so just great walking through the hallowed halls of a law school and talking with the, and some of them are, but some of them are all in and like they're intrigued. And when I said to them yesterday, what's the point of mediation? What's the goal? Some of them were like, oh, and some of them were like, what's the goal? And I was like, yes, and it was a little bit of magic, and it was so much fun. And so that's what I'd love to do one day, would to teach at a law school one day. Well, I will one day.
Well, wonderful. Well, I definitely can want to support you on that because I've
Thank
had
you for asking.
Experience. Yes. And I want to just in closing point out, I always like to say, we've come a long way, baby, but we still got a long way to go,
Yes.
Because back when I was teaching ADR in law school, it was, I think I started in 2008 and continued to about 2012, I think it was. And at that point, I remember my first couple of classes, because I taught negotiation, mediation, arbitration. And my first couple of classes, I had students going, I had no idea this mediation had so much psychology to it, and it's like, duh, you're dealing with people, and so that's one thing that's really passionate me as far as, there is the psychology of how people show up.
There is.
And it's not just the facts of the case, it's not just the emotions you go through court, but again, the process, and then how do you engage people? And so, and more recently, the neuroscience. And so it's exciting.
That's sometimes half of the battle.
Right.
If you can do that, then you can get them. Sometimes that's what you've got to do for. I mean, it's case by case, but I couldn't agree with you more. And they don't teach it that way. It needs to be part of it because it's so true. And when you get it and you see it, it opens more doors for you, and it makes you better. So keep on preaching and teaching what you teach, because we need to hear it. We really, really do. And it's made a difference.
Yeah, and I will just say, again, for our listeners and viewers out there, because as we talk about decoding the conflict mindset, we see this a lot in family law, where we now have certified real estate divorce specialists. We have certified financial divorce analysts.
Yeah.
So the field has truly become interdisciplinary.
True.
And certainly in the collaborative
Niche. Yeah.
model, and so it behooves our
It does.
professional mediators as well as our leaders to know and understand
Mhm.
a little bit more about the psychology and emotional content
Yes,
of
ma'am.
people that they're dealing with.
Yes, you can get people to work better together if
Yes.
you can help them, and if you recognize it, it just makes it a little bit easier, and it is more of a transformative
Yeah.
kind of experience that the folks can walk away with and be in a better place.
Mhm.
Hopefully, when it works.
Yes, and it works a lot. So thank you,
It
Ty
works a lot.
Burdoni,
Thank you.
Chief Architect of
What a
Mediator
pleasure.
Training in Central
What a
Florida.
pleasure.
And
Thank you so much.
well,
I've so enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. And to our viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed what you hear, please pass it on. Subscribe so you get notification of future episodes. And, a lot of us may fear conflict, but guess what? Conflict is around every corner. And so the better and better we get at it, then the better our lives will be and those around us. And so here's to decoding the conflict mindset. Dr. Debra Dupree, the Mindset Doc. Well, I hope you found the interview with Ty Burdoni as fascinating as I did. As you can see, we both are passionate about helping people navigate through conflict, managing those intense emotions that can arise, and how to redirect that so we can get back to living our lives in healthier, happier ways. Always something to learn. Well, our next guest coming up in just 2 more weeks is Diane O'Connell. Now, Diane comes to us with a very interesting story. Not only has she been an attorney, a litigator, but she also has experienced her own mental health challenges. Her experience with that actually led her into a different approach to dealing with people in conflict and became a mediator. And it was through her experiences that she became aware of the significant shortages in workplace well-being for our employees of today's world. So listen and learn what she uncovered in terms of the broken systems in today's workplace and how she has managed to make a shift, make a change, and certainly improve the quality of her life as well as the lives of others. So please subscribe now, Decoding the Conflict Mindset. Be ready in 2 more weeks for Diane O'Connell, and can't wait to have you join us. I'm Dr. Debra Dupree, the Mindset Doc. Let others know about mental health in the workplace.